Continue with punishment and reward of Kali. Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Vasudevaya.
Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Punishment and reward of Kali. 17. No, 16. Is that right? Yeah. Give a little context before we do the verse. When Kali Yuga began, Parikshit was wandering his kingdom and wondering what's going on. And when he saw the bull of religiosity standing on one leg, being tortured by a Sudra, low-class person, let's say. And the low-class person was dressed in royal garments. Does that remind you of world leaders nowadays? Low-class people dressed in royal-type garments. We see that all over the world. We don't have to go on. I was having a conversation with a very good friend of mine who happens to have been chair of the Democratic Party of the county, discussing the national political mess. He asked, what's my summary of it? Here was my summary, and he 100% agreed. Democrats are stupid, Republicans are mean. Now, Republicans can be stupid and Democrats can be mean. It can go either way. But it's the symptom of Kali Yuga, where it's very hard to find people who are actually statesmen and leaders, but they wear the royal dress. In other words, they wear the accoutrements of a prime minister or president or whatever they want to be. And we find that when these people take their office, we can use a real life example of somebody everyone knows is a registered certified nutcase. Kim, the president, whatever his title is, of North Korea. He's quite famous for killing his enemies, being mean and cruel, everything nasty. So it's like using certain examples you can use that create no controversy, like Hitler or Kim or some of these other crazy leaders. And you'll see him in pictures, he's often wearing many medals and the uniform of a general, though he's never fought in his life and never did anything shocking. Oh, wearing these fancy uniforms and they'll have ribbons and they have, just like they're wearing the royal dress, but they're actually just low-class people. What do low-class people do? They act low-class. That's easy. And they don't really have compassion for people. They don't have a sense to protect. They actually work on principles of lust, greed, anger, etc. So I mentioned in a prior class when the 12th canto was being produced, I ran the BDT division that did that. And as the manuscript was being written, Hridayana Maharaj, with help of Gopi Pranada and others, was writing the 12th canto. Prabhupada had left this already. And so I would read the manuscript as we're getting ready to typeset it and turn it into books with pictures and Sanskrit and all of that. As I was reading it, I would chuckle. The predictions of what Kali Yuga would look like. Oh, I'll never see that in my lifetime. Ho, 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 ho. Got that one wrong. And we really see it. So in this verse, we're going to get into a very, very important detail of Kali Yuga. And that is emergencies. How do we know what to do and not to do under difficult circumstances? And I'll give some stories to illustrate it, and then I'll leave plenty of time for all your personal questions on this, because I assume there might be some. So we'll begin with the verse. Who would like to chant it? Look up something else in the meantime. He's a good chanter. Raja of the king or the head executive high, certainly param supreme dharma, occupational duty. Many dharma can be expanded upon for weeks of lectures, what it means, but it's the essence. Water is what? What is water? Wet. Dharma is the essence. It's the essence of things. Swadharma, one who is faithful to his prescribed duty. Avanam, giving protection always. Shasata, while ruling, Anya, others. According to Shastra, rulings of scriptures, on without danger. Persons going astray, as a matter of fact. As a matter of fact. And that is a very important word. We find it commonly in Shastra, an emphatic word, as a matter of fact. This must be. The supreme duty of the ruling king is to give protection to law-abiding persons, and to chastise those who stray from the ordinances of the scriptures in ordinary times when there is no emergency. Would like to read the first paragraph of the purport? Yes.
In the scriptures, there is no mention of apadharma or occupational duty at times of extraordinary happenings. It is said that sometimes the great sage Viswamitra had to live on the flesh of dogs in some extraordinary dangerous position. In case of emergency, One may be allowed to live on the flesh of animals of all description. That does not mean that there should be regular slaughterhouses to feed the animal eaters, and that this system should be encouraged by the state. No one should try to live on flesh in ordinary times, simply for the sake of the palate. If anyone does so, the king or the executive head should punish him for gross enjoyment.
There are regular scriptural injunctions for different persons engaged in different occupational duties, and one who follows them is called Swadharmasta, or faithful in one's prescribed duties. In the Gita, it is advised that one should not give up his or her occupational prescribed duties, even if they are not always flawless. Such Swadharma may be violated in cases of emergency, if one is forced by circumstances, but they cannot be violated in ordinary times. The state executive head is to see that such Swadharma is not changed by the follower, whatever it may be, and should give all protection to the followers of Swadharma. The violator is subject to punishment in terms of the Shastra and duty of the king, so that everyone strictly follows his occupational duty as prescribed in the scripture. So I'll tell a story that actually happened. In the early 70s, the Calcutta Temple, who's been to the ISKCON Calcutta Temple? Still there, same temple. Is that Albert Road, I think? A Western lady was coming to Arctic, older lady, and dancing. The devotees didn't pay much attention to her. Some old white lady coming to the temple and dancing. So what? Prabhupada noticed. He thought that was strange. I mean, those days in India, you didn't find, generally Western people were hippies for the most part. A few devotees were there. The movement in India then was all Western. When Prabhupada left the planet, there might have been 20 Indian disciples. It's a very Western movement. And an older white lady coming to the temple was just unusual. Of course, devotees, not being always the sharpest knife on the rack, as we say, sort of missed it. And Prabhupada immediately noticed, said, "Find out who that is." So devotees found out who it was. She was coming to Arctic and dancing. Nobody said anything. Turns out she was the wife of the Consulate General of Poland, who somehow was attracted to Arctic and coming. Prabhupada, being Prabhupada, understood what this meant and immediately said, "Let's meet her." And the devotees met her. I think Prabhupada met her. I don't recall the precise detail. And yes, Prabhupada did meet her, and he made a request of her. Now, what was the world situation? This was around 72, 73, in that time frame. I don't know the exact year. What was the world situation? What was going on in the world scene? Can somebody tell me? Let's get a microphone so the audience can hear it.
Vietnam and civil rights.
That was going on. But what was going on the world scene? The whole world. That was civil rights in America, Vietnam and Vietnam. The whole world. Cold War. Between who? Soviet Union and America. And by the way, who did America side with in South Asia? Somebody tell me, who did America side with? Pakistan. Who did the Soviet Union side with? India. And to this day, we still see the remnants of that. Because when the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan, Americans armed who? Who did Americans arm to fight the Soviet Union? The Taliban. Yes. There's an old saying, "We have met the enemy. It is us." So that was the scene in America. When I was living not far from Calcutta, the American consulate was on a particular road, I think it was Harrison Road, something like that. And the local government, there was an elected communist government, renamed the street. Who was America's biggest enemy by name in early 70s? Well, a person, Vietnam, the leader of who we were fighting in Vietnam, the North Vietnamese leader. What was his name? Come on, somebody studied history here. Oh, come on. There's a city named after him right now in Vietnam. Who's that? Ho Chi Minh. Saigon is now called Ho Chi Minh. Ho Chi Minh. So the communist government in Bengal renamed the road the American embassy was on Ho Chi Minh Mark. And so the American government stationery had to say on their address of Ho Chi Minh Road, which I thought was really funny. It was a good sense of humor. Anyway, the American government didn't think it was as funny as I did. So that was the scene that was going on. And we had the Iron Curtain, it was called. And the Iron Curtain was in the Soviet bloc, which included Ukraine, and Poland, and Latvia, and Lithuania, all these countries, now even some NATO countries, they were all part of the Soviet bloc, either part of the Soviet Union or influenced by the Soviet Union. Hungary, all these countries, Czechoslovakia, all part of the Soviet bloc. And it was an Iron Curtain, meaning it was very difficult for a Westerner to even enter into there. Maybe you could enter if you were a trader or something. Some merchants would be allowed, but basically it was off limits. And as far as Americans getting visas to Soviet countries like Poland, it was unheard of. But Prabhupada saw an opportunity. And he saw that the Polish consulate general's wife was coming to the temple. So he said to her, we want to get visas to Poland. And you may wonder how this fits into the verse. But keep wondering, you'll find out soon. And she went to her husband and got visas for American devotees to go behind the Iron Curtain to Poland. Now, those of you born in the last 25 years, even 40 years, didn't see the Cold War, don't understand how significant that was. That was huge, unheard of. So Prabhupada sent Harikesh Swami and 2 or 3 other devotees got their visas and went and spent the winter in Poland. Prabhupada had already been to Moscow. We saw the huge potential for outreach behind the eye. Huge potential. And practicing religion there was practically illegal. And it was very, very heavy sin. So Prabhupada got the visas, sent them off. They got the visas amazingly, because Consul General, he could stamp a visa. They went off to Poland, and they spent the winter in Poland. And they did their outreach and meeting people and whatever books they could smuggle in, sharing some books. It was a success. Sometimes Prabhupada would say, just being there is successful. Like, for example, when Dayananda went to Saudi Arabia, he was with IBM and took a job in Saudi Arabia. He said to Prabhupada, what should I do? Well, then, when you went into Saudi Arabia, they would inspect your bags. If they found any religious books, like a Gita, they put it on the ground and stomp on it before throwing it out. We couldn't even smuggle the Gita in. It was so terrible. I mean, just anything was that wasn't Islamic was forbidden. A very, very conservative place at that time. Still is to some degree, but much more even extreme then. And Prabhupada said to Dayananda said, I'm trying to do outreach work, but it's so difficult. And Prabhupada said to him, just being there is good. It was so difficult. Just don't worry, just being there is a big deal. Turned out to be a big deal, and he was able to plant seeds. So these devotees went to Poland, and they spent the winter there, and they came back afterwards. And when they came back to see Prabhupada, they were emaciated. They were so thin, they were skin and bone. Prabhupada said, "What happened?" Can you guess what happened? Yeah, no vegetarian food. Unless you were rich, then you could buy something. But if you didn't have a lot of money, it was only meat and a little bit of some nuts, a little bit of vegetables. It was very, very hard to eat. And so Harikesh said to Prabhupada, "There's nothing to eat but meat." And then Prabhupada said something very strange. You know what he said in the story? He said, "Then eat meat." And Prabhupada said, "What about my consciousness?" And what did Prabhupada say? The microphone. Yeah.
I'm not sure if I have the exact words, but it was something like "to hell your consciousness."
Damn your consciousness.
Preaching is more
Preach.
important.
Now, I've talked to Harikesh in detail about this incident. It's clear to me and clear to him that Prabhupada never intended him to eat meat. But what was the point Prabhupada was making? In an emergency, you have to do what's necessary. In an emergency, you do it necessary, understanding it's an emergency. So Prabhupada was trying to make a point. And the point wasn't that we should change the Krishna lunch menu to include chicken McNuggets because it will attract people. That wasn't the point. The point was, in an emergency, sometimes you have to do the needful. And there are many examples of that. How to distinguish between the emergency and ordinary activities is pretty easy. I mean, we can say, "Boy, I have a real emergency today. I don't feel well. I think I need a drink." And I've seen that happen quite a bit. That's not the real emergency. But in an emergency, Prabhupada's making a point. Earlier, Prabhupada says, earlier in this chapter, Prabhupada says, "A man could subsist on varieties of grains, fruits, and milk, ordained by God, and there is no need of animal food, save except in particular cases." Now, how does that affect us here? I'll tell another story that will put this in context. There was this very nice devotee, Sarveshri, and she had a loving grandfather. She loved her grandfather, just adored her grandfather. Anybody here have a grandfather that just adored? You know what that's like, the affection you feel for your loving grandfather. It can be very, very intense. And so a loving grandfather, and he died. Because everyone dies. And when he died, she was quite grief-stricken. And the devotees, in their infinite compassion, reminded her that her grandfather was a kosher butcher, a butcher according to Jewish kosher laws, and that he would suffer a death for every hair on the cow's body over and over and over and over again. Over and over, loving grandfather, yes, that's what happened to him. And we feel sorry for you, your grandfather died. Sarveshri was staying with us at the time and told me this story. So she was not only grief-stricken, 1,000 million times grief-stricken. Not only loving grandfather died, but now the devotees in her infinite compassion are reminding her of how many hairs there are on a cow's body, and I don't want to go through that count. So she went to see Prabhupada. Anybody know this story? So she went to see, you know this. Oh, yeah. She went to see Prabhupada and said, "Prabhupada, my loving grandfather died. He was a very pious religious man. And he killed cows according to the Jewish principles, which then you kill the cow, you say some prayers, you do it in some compassionate way. There are very rules in the Old Testament on how to do this. And he said that's what he did, but now he's going to go to hell for every hair on the cow's body. And Prabhupada said, no, that's not what's happening. And Prabhupada said shockingly to her the other day, he acted according to religious principles. He went to heaven. Shocking. You think you would kill a cow? He's a cow killer, so he does for a living. He went to heaven. So the point is that he was acting according to a religious principle. So the idea of this chapter emphasizes the horrors of meat eating, and especially cow killing, because cow gives you milk. In the Old Testament, they have kosher laws, and the kosher laws are quite interesting. One of the kosher laws is that you do not eat a kid in the milk of its mother, meaning a calf. You can't have milk with it. And so in a strict Jewish household, I was brought up this way. In a strict Jewish household, if meat is served, dairy is never served, because it's considered sinful to eat a calf, in the milk of its mother. It's considered just inhumane. So in my house, we would have one set of silverware for dairy and one for non-dairy, one for meat. So what was meat could never touch it. Now, it was a very strange phenomenon to me, because Jews would never eat pork. So when my parents would bring pork into the house, like in a Chinese restaurant, we would only serve it on paper plates. Heaven forbid we contaminate the fork. Our body, who cares? But the fork, never the fork. So these are religious principles gone amok. And so here's what we're talking about here. How do we know when something's really an emergency and when something is religious principles gone amok? Yes.
I just really want to appreciate that point of how Prabhupada responded to the devotee who lost her grandfather, because it's like, that's the danger of seeing things as black and white when you read the Bhagavatam, right? Or the danger of taking one of Prabhupada's statements without looking at the context around it, because it might say, if you kill a cow, then this many hairs on the body, but Prabhupada was like actually seeing the full picture, and then he could see the outcome based on the full picture of that person's life. Like, it's not, karma is not so black and white, and who do we think we are to think we can understand someone else's karma or even our own karma? I had a very similar experience when I first I came to ISKCON in Vrindavan. So I joined ISKCON in Vrindavan, and I remember sitting in the MBT restaurant. I'm brand new, like yogi who wants to become a devotee, and I don't know how we got into it, but oh yeah, they were talking about how, like, if you eat meat, you go to hell, And I said, well, what about my mother, who is like such a God conscious lady and who like sang the Bible, was in the choir, went to church every day, and we prayed all day, and she sang me to sleep at night with like, Christian songs, and she's like devoted her whole life to God. Like, what about someone like her? Like, yeah, she happens to eat meat. And these devotees were like, yep, she's going to hell. She's going to hell. And I remember I started crying and like arguing with these devotees. I was brand new. I was like, but she's pious, that doesn't make any sense to me. And then what you just said, Prabhupada's response, that shows Prabhupada's vision as a pure devotee, and that we as devotees need to be so compassionate and so aware when we speak with people, what we say to them.
It's so true what you're saying. I had to give a class to, there's a group of devotees former Guru coolies in their, let's say, 40s. So they asked me to give them a talk on the 4 regulative principles. So I got a cute name for the talk. 4 regulative principles. No meat, fish, or eggs, and what the hell is the other one? And I gave examples of where Prabhupada took each regulative principle and saw it as a spectrum, not black and white. Because as devotees, one reason we drink milk, for those who can tolerate milk, not everyone can, is to get the finer brain tissue cultivated. With finer brain tissue, we can make the distinctions that you're talking about. Because often we don't make those distinctions. One of the worst things we can do, I asked RDK, this is brilliant. Well, I asked him one time, what's the most dangerous thing for ISKCON? And he immediately blurted out, didn't think for a microsecond, the most dangerous thing for ISKCON. Are you ready? Prabhupada says. It's the most dangerous thing, because there's no context. There's no, Prabhupada often would say this and say that, because Prabhupada would speak in context. The Bhagavatam, the Gita, can only be stood in context. You take each verse, you have to look at it in context. Words change meanings. The word Atman means one thing in one verse, another thing in another verse. So if you just want to be, they used to have something called Bible thumpers. Anybody know what a Bible thumper is? Maybe they don't have that expression now. Bible thumpers, these are these itinerant preachers who travel around, and they go and they tell you you're going to hell. And they do is they take the Bible, and what they do is they go like this, and Jesus says, and they thump it. They're called Bible thumpers because they thump as they're speaking. I'm not kidding. So they call Bible thumpers. You look it up. You know that. You see thumpers?
It's a real term.
It's a real term, Bible thumpers. And if you don't do it, Jesus will get you. Thump, thump, thump. The Bible thumpers. And the Bible thumpers are very notorious for just quoting a verse, but without context, without intelligence. We're supposed to, that's why we have classes, rise above that. So when I gave this lecture, the regulative principles are extremely important. What brings us to the mode of goodness. It's what keeps us from being differentiated from the masses. It gives us a chance to rise our consciousness. At the same time, we can't be fanatics. I'll give you an example we'll put in context. I'm going to ask this question. Is investing in a business gambling? Who says yes? Who says no? Who doesn't know? And who's not really a class? I want everyone to participate. Give the chance those who are here but not here to participate. Is investing in the stock market gambling?
Yes.
Who says yes? Who says no? Okay. Why do you say no?
You don't have to. And there's no help. How can we do this?
And the answer to this question is both are correct. One man's food is another man's poison. For me personally, to invest in the stock market is gambling. I mean, I just don't have a brain for it. And I don't have money for it, so Krishna did all the right things. Krishna knew me. And for somebody else, to invest in a business may be a proper business for a Vaishya. For somebody else who's Brahminically inclined, it may be total speculation. So we have to examine our own heart. So everything, there's a spectrum of things. So 3 times Prabhupada gave detailed instructions of how to make wine. Detailed. And what did he say at the end of the instructions? Don't do it. It was very funny because there's a medicinal purpose to it. Why in the Middle Ages did people, when there was no proper water systems, why didn't people just, everyone been dying of dysentery and cholera? Because they drank wine. And wine is alcohol, we killed the bacteria. So there are times and places and circumstances. Generally, it's not a good idea to drink. But Ayurvedic medicines are usually herbs dissolved in vodka. They are tinctures. And so sometimes you have to take it just for your health and to do things. So as devotees, in the name of an emergency, the danger is now I can do whatever I want, eat, drink, and even be married. I can do all of those things. That's the big danger. The other big danger on the other side is to be so rigid that you tell a devotee whose dear grandfather died that he's going to hell for billions of times. So those are the two rigid positions we don't have. But if we're not rigid, how do we know what to do? It's so easy to be rigid. If you're rigid, this is it. You must do this, you must do that. And you have piles of should until the should goes all the way over your head, big piles of should. So how do you get this middle road? Well, the only way to do it is cultivate your higher intelligence. How do you cultivate higher intelligence? I asked Prabhupada that question. How do I cultivate higher intelligence? What's the number one principle for cultivating higher intelligence? Let's hear from some of you what you think. Yes. Association. That's number one. Good association. What's the number one way of cultivating stupidity? Yes. The converse works every time. It works every time. So who we associate with is very important. And then what we eat and what we do and rising early and sun, all the things we do are very, very important. But if we have good association, then these other things will automatically be encouraged to do. So it's almost end time. So I'm going to stop and see if there are any questions on how we know what is emergency duty and what is regular duty and how we make these decisions. I'll stop here. Any questions? Yes.
Thank you, Prabhu. Could you tell us what Prabhupada said about cultivating higher intelligence, or was it actually?
Well, good association.
Oh,
That was it. That was really it.
oh.
He said, who you associate with will determine almost everything else. And I've made that my principle of who, and by association, I mean, I preface every side with the mayor. He's a nice guy. He's even a vegetarian and a pious man. And I like him. And he likes me. But there are certain things I can't reveal my mind to him. But I like to because he doesn't necessarily understand the principles of Bhakti Yoga. So who we reveal our mind to, and then there are people I have to associate for other reasons that I have to be more guarded. So who I can reveal my mind to is, according to the Upadeshamrita, we should reveal our mind in confidence and listen. But that has to be somebody qualified. It has to be somebody at our level. It has to be somebody who we trust. And trust is the key word. So if I would go at my breakfast, ask, well, what do you think we should do for this policy? Which is typical discussion. And I'll say, well, I think Krishna would be most pleased if I can't quite reveal my mind. That's what I'm thinking. So I have to word it more diplomatically. But that's an art. It's a real art. Okay, that's a good question. And yes.
I had a really good experience. So coming to the emergencies, so I was living at one place where I could not eat any fat because they were serving me all those things.
Mm.
And I prayed to the God, Krishna, saying that I will, you're punishing me with all these things. I am your devotee. Please give me strength. I eat for just on water for 3 days. Nothing happened to me.
Yeah, very good. Very good. You know what to do. Any other questions on emergency versus ordinary activities. It's one we all have to think about.
So what I'm trying to say is think about a God, pray to the God, even though emergencies, even Sarah is water,
It's true. I asked Prabhupada, what if somebody's like a thief, but he's praying to God to be successful? And what's his position? You know, please, my dear Lord, may I be successful in robbing this bank. And in India, I saw quite a bit of that happen. And the people generally are pious in India, but in the wrong way. And so I asked Prabhupada, what happens if a thief is praying? He says, well, he's praying, right? Yes. And he's pious. In other words, even if he's praying, he's better off than the thief who wasn't praying. Now, better off if he's not a thief at all. But if he's a thief, better to be praying than not praying. That was an interesting answer. Because at least he's getting some sense of piety. Did I tell you the story about the bus driver and priest who went in front of Yamaraj? Maybe I told this, I don't remember if I told this guy. So a bus driver and a priest both died and were in front of Yamaraj. And as soon as Yamaraj, and the bus driver drove the mountain road going up into the Himalayas. I've been on that road, winding road with no guardrails. Very scary road. And so they're in front of Yamaraj, and Yamaraj goes to the bus driver, you go right to heaven, you're in. He says to the priest, you're not ready yet, you have more pious activities to do. And the priest said, what do you mean? You're like an ordinary bus driver in. I've ministered to so many people my whole life. And Yamaraj says, nobody got more people praying than that bus driver. Been on that bus. I was praying. So it's that kind of circumstance. So praying is good. So are there any final question? I have to join the TOVP meeting shortly.
Emergencies. I was a while just remember that when Prabhupada was in Russia, so came back then, and they were cooking prasad and they didn't have so I think Prabhupada was
Ate out of his lotus.
his lotus.
The bathroom lotus.
In the bathroom lotus.
Because that's more important than starving and having no energy to preach. That's a very good example. Prabhupada uses bathroom lotus because it was nothing. It was great austerity. Sometimes you must do the needful. Sometimes, one time, when I was living in India, I made it a point. I said, look, I'm an American, technically working for the American government. We call 500 rupees a month working. And I decided, I made a few decisions. I wasn't devoted there, but somehow which inspired me to make a few decisions. I said I would not ever enter into discussion of American politics. Because the Cold War was going on, America was kind of siding with Pakistan and Soviets with India, as we discussed. So I sort of made my own vow, stay out of American politics. If I do, it will be dangerous. And then it happened. 500 students marched from the college to my house to lynch me. And the only time I was ever in danger in India was during riots. Generally, in India, as far as your bodily harm, it's much safer than most places in America. You just don't get mugged. It's just rare. At least in those days, it just didn't happen. But riots were very, very dangerous. Very dangerous, especially where I lived. And some students used to visit me and they would joke that I was CIA, and I would jokingly say, "Yeah, of course I am." We were joking. And one student who never came, I put a map on the wall, and I drew an arrow from China for missiles and from Pakistan with tanks, just as a joke, because they were saying I was CIA. Just it was like a sarcastic map. Anybody who looked at it would understand it was a joke. So this one guy came and kept staring at it. He didn't think it was a joke. We went back and told him, it was right on the wall. And he told all the other students he found my secret map and that I was a spy. So 500 students decided to march and lynch me. And there was no place to go in the village. The cops had sticks and the cops would run. There was literally no place to go. What would you have done? Well, if I was smarter, I might have done that. What's that? There's no place to hide, literally no place, small town. I really like this. No place to hide. I flew fast. I got 5 minutes. Somebody came running ahead. One of the students who I knew said, "By the way, they're going to kill you. Nice knowing you."
I'm a double agent.
What's that?
I'm a double agent, actually.
Almost what I did. That's close. What would you have done? Come on, quick. You got 3 minutes left. They're going to kill you. What's that?
I don't like bits and
Almost.
pieces.
There's no one to negotiate. What I did is I had to think real quick. So I made a sign, kind of broke my vow about politics. I made a sign. Nixon was president then. It was very unpopular in India, very unpopular. So I made a sign, "I hate Nixon too." And I stood on the roof of the house, big smile, laughing, jumping up and down. It was a flat roof. Going, "I hate Nixon too," just jumping up and down. So they just marched by cheering me and did their demonstration. And I lived. So it was an emergency. So I had to break my vow not to talk any politics in India. But I had to do it. It was an emergency. That's what I had to do to live. So sometimes we have to do these things. I'm still here to talk about it. Quite amazing. Okay, with that, we'll stop here. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna, and I pray that none of you have any emergencies today.